And a lot of times the lenders that advertise the most are the worst lenders, because they're able to advertise a lot, because when they actually get a customer, it's worth a ton to them. Whereas some mom and pop shop making loans for 15%, and they're loaning out $60 million to a certain industry that they think is very highly likely to be able to pay them back and give them a 15% return. They might hardly be advertising at all.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be who you get a loan from is very important. It just kind of depends, I would say, on what industry you're in. I wouldn't know if you were a retail store, well, it might get cheaper. We have no assets to lend against, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing to collateralize with software, because you can't just say, well, this software is worth something. Or like,
Mm-hmm.
you mean all those ones and zeros? How do I sell that? I don't understand. Whereas if you're a retail store, maybe you can collateralize your inventory and you can get a loan against that. Or if you're a trucking company, you can use your trucks as collateral. Companies like that can go to banks and get money. My mom did not work when I was younger. She stopped working when I was born and started working again when I was like 13. And she's a pretty good cook, so she would generally cook dinner for me and my sister. My dad worked in the city. This is Chicago, and so he would often not get home till 9 o'clock or so, but sometimes he'd be at home by 7 in time for when the kids were eating dinner. So it just depended on if he had to work a lot or had meetings or what. But so we had a lot of full family dinners with all four of us, and then a lot of just the three of us.
Excellent. And do you feel like you were exposed to entrepreneurialism at a young age, or was this something that maybe your time spent at Google, you sort of developed that taste for?
Yeah, I guess I always kind of had a taste for it. I think my dad was an entrepreneur. Well, in a sense, he started a small law firm. Just him and a couple other lawyers, and so he had to run that business. I guess he's the product in that scenario, but so it's a little different. But he was running a business, and so I was exposed to that from very early on. My mom did a lot. She's an art teacher by trade, so she had a lot of little businesses making different artistic knickknacks that she would sell at like crafts fairs. So I was always going to those crafts fairs with her and watching her sell stuff to people. I started a fireworks business when I was about 12. So fireworks were illegal in Illinois, but that was to sell them. You could still order them by mail, because then mail isn't regulated by the states, regulated by the Fed. So I guess is why they're allowed to do it. But they, companies in Indiana could send fireworks to people in Illinois. So I would order boxes of fireworks and sell them to my classmates. And I was chewing up everybody's lunch money there for a while.
That's funny. So were you bringing the fireworks, to school in your backpack, or what was the distribution model there?
Yeah, it was, well, I would bring them to school, or people would just come by my house. Yeah, my parents thought it was pretty weird. People would just like ring the doorbell and hang out in my room with me for like 10 minutes and then leave. I think they thought I was, selling weed or something, but I was only 12. So
yeah.
I'm not sure they were watching that closely, but, or I'd just like meet people outside, I guess. It was a more common thing, because I think they started asking questions. And so I changed my distribution model. I had a little soda business too for a while. Never got high on my own supply on that one, but the fireworks, I blew off a lot of fireworks. But the soda business, I would just swing by the grocery store and get a case of soda and stick it in a bag, and another case of soda, and put it on my lap and bike that to school. And then I would sell them for, well, depending on the buyer, anywhere between $1 to $2 a can. But I was buying them for like 14 cents a can. So it was like, generic soda.
Yeah. Great margin there. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Not as good as fireworks, but it was still pretty strong.
Yeah, no, that's great. So that kind of got you through high school, I would assume, or middle school, I guess.
That was middle school business. Yeah. I think I did get suspended once in high school for I was selling get out of school free passes from a dentist's office that I'd gotten my little grubby hands on. Those fetched a higher price point. I got caught for that one though, because about 20 kids who were all friends with each other were all going to the same dentist the same day, so they caught on to that one pretty fast, and didn't have to shake many people to catch me. So that was a
Yeah.
short-lived business, but yet short-lived but profitable. So
Yeah,
I had to take a few days off school on that one.
that's funny. That is great. So you went to school at Stanford. What was your major when you started?
I went to the University of Wisconsin for undergrad, and then
Ah,
I was at Stanford for business school. So it was an MBA.
very cool, very cool. And did that lead you directly into Google then when you graduated
No, I
Stanford
went
or?
after Stanford. I went to IBM, and then a software company called Autonomy, which ended up getting purchased by HP for way too much money. But that's another story. Poor HP.
and and
But
and
then
so
I went from HP, so I went from Autonomy to Google.
okay, so those other companies kind of gave you the foundation to jump into Google, and obviously you had great success at Google. Could you talk a little bit about maybe some of the things that you learned at the other companies, and then how that translated into Google, and how you're able to achieve what you did at Google?
Yeah, I mean, I had some lucky years when I was at Google, where I managed to sell some software. The I think the trick there was in terms of what I had learned earlier. I mean, I when I was at Autonomy, it was a very independent place, so it was really they really treated it like you know as a software salesperson there, you're kind of running your own little business, very little overhead support from no account based marketing. They had like kind of corporate marketing and air cover, but nothing that would like really generate leads or anything like that. um, so I guess I learned there to be pretty aggressive and do the things to get attention and get deals done. uh, which then when I went to Google, which was a much nicer environment in terms of a great marketing team, great support, great product, kind of no brainer product at the time. I was focused on their software products, not the main thing they do, the ad the ads on the internet, but like I was mostly working with like the whole Google Apps suite and the Google Maps API, and they have some security products I was working with, and and a lot of them had a really nice. They were positioned very well against existing options for people. Like if you were on Lotus Notes for your email as a company, it was kind of a no-brainer to move to Google Apps at the time. I mean, you could have moved to Microsoft too. That also would have been a no-brainer. But um, so it was just that was a good time to be there. I think it was they had a product that was really well positioned and really looked was doing great in the market. But yeah, I guess I by bringing it was also kind of a soft place. Like it wasn't very not very aggressive, and not people weren't working that hard. And I think you know I brought kind of the way I brought the things that I learned in a very kind of aggressive, lean environment to that environment, and it ended up working out real well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what types of customers were you going after for Google? Like who's your target audience?
Um, when I was at Google, it was I was in charge of large deals, like for going into certain states. So I was covering like 12 states in the country for large deals. So a company that had 3,000 employees and was needed email for all of them was the type of customer that I was going after. Or it could have been a company that needed a lot of Google Maps API consumption, regardless of size. That that was kind of broken up more by need.
Mm-hmm. And Badger Maps. I think that was probably your next step after Google. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I left Google in 2012 in January. I had to stay till the end of the year to get my bonus, and so January 6th of 2012, Badger was born. And so Badger Maps, it's a software that helps field salespeople, and I had, because my background was in field sales, and then I had worked a lot with the mapping products at Google and Badger is built on top of some of those mapping products. Um, I knew a lot about the way you would make a piece of software like this, and I also knew a lot about the problems that field salespeople face. And so I really had a pretty clear idea of the first 5 years or so of what I would want to build to solve the problems field salespeople have. And so I started doing that in 2012, and now we're got 70 employees, and we're growing fast, and we've solved a ton of problems for field salespeople. And when I say field salespeople, I mean like people that go out into the field to meet with their customers face to face. So like real common in medical device sales or pharmaceutical sales, or selling tires to tire stores or beer to bars. Those are all face-to-face meetings and relationships, and that's a very different sales experience than selling something over the phone or selling something e-commerce or in a retail environment. They have a very unique set of problems that mobile devices with maps on them allowed us to solve.
That's interesting. So again, one of our companies, we're in real estate, and it is very much so, relationship based. You're always, talking to investors, you're talking to brokers, trying to find deals, trying to find money. So, I would imagine that it's very much so the same, that could be a product that a real estate investor could potentially be interested in.
Oh, for sure. I mean, some of the biggest real estate companies in the country are customers of ours. So there's a real estate company that has 450 reps out in the field, and they use Badger.
Wow.
And a lot of like individual people do too, because of our ability to. We don't advertise. Like if you go to our website, it's like field sales, which but really it's the problems that we're solving for field salespeople. A real estate agent or a real estate investor actually have the same exact problem set. It's not a customer. It's not a doctor that you're putting on the map. It's a piece of real estate that has unique attributes.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk about when you decided that you were going to make this jump to Badger. It doesn't sound like you had any coding ability, correct?
No. I my background was all business, not technical at all. So it was really that first hire of someone that was going to start building the actual software was a very important one. And the business was bootstrapped at first, so I needed to find someone I could only afford one, and they had to be great to get us out of the gate. And so, and I lucked out there. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a brilliant hirer of people, but I ended up getting real lucky on that one.
That's great. And did you pick that from your network, or did you have some type of a service or something like that you used to find that person? Or is that, again, maybe a Google connection?
I did that. I found him on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Based on a very specific set of skills that in LinkedIn lets you get real specific in your searches. So I was able to really zoom in on a very particular person.
Interesting. Excellent. So now you are off to the races. You have your programmer that's building this for you. What's the next step? What do you do? Obviously, you have to get customers in. At what point did you start reaching out to them? Did you build an MVP? Here's basic functionality, and then go out, or
no? I built a picture of what the MVP would look like.
Okay.
But yeah, and this is a big advantage that our company had when we were a startup over other people, is that we had a professional salesperson on staff, me, and most companies with 2 people can't and shouldn't pay for that. I mean, it's an expensive resource, obviously, but I was free to me. So,
Hmm.
um, but I was able to reach out to way more customers than people normally would at our stage, and kind of run enterprise level marketing and sales plays, and get the concept in front of a lot more people, have conversations with a lot more people than I otherwise would have been able to, which both helped us tune exactly what we were building and going to bring to market, because I understood exactly what was needed to make those first sales. And also it allowed me to have a bunch of people lined up when things were ready to be sold. So, and I think that's so important, because so many people validate, you know, don't validate that someone will actually purchase their software, and they don't pre-line people up to purchase their software. And so it ends up really extending the adoption curve runway that you would otherwise have needed. And that's not just in the software industry, but I would imagine that's in any industry. If you build up a bunch of demand before you actually, if you're importing stuff, if a bunch of demand has already been built by the time the stuff reaches the port from wherever it was being made, if you've got that demand already, you're going to sell it a lot quicker. And for us, it was not only lining up a lot of people, but having the conversation. Hey, this is what we're building right now, and explaining it to them. This is approximately when it'll be done. It'll be done in approximately 4 months. Is that something that you'd be interested in purchasing at that time? If it does what I'm saying it's going to do, and that's a different question than, are you interested in this? It's
Hmm.
actually locking in a yes, I'd be interested in purchasing it, and then the next step is for how much, and the way I would do that was, okay, so um, and I haven't done this for a while. This talk path. What did I say? I had this down at the time. It was like, okay, so um, eh, we don't know exactly what we're going to be charging for this in a year, but it's going to be around, let's just say $1 million a year for this product. But if you lock in now and say that you will buy it, and then you actually do buy it in 4 months when it's ready, and you don't have to sign anything today, but if you purchase it in 4 months, I'll be giving it to you for $100,000. I think in
Okay.
a year after that, it'll be going for $1 million, but your price will be grandfathered in at $100,000. And it doesn't matter if you're eventually going to charge $1 million or not, because you've kind of couched it and saying, we've got a lot to figure out here.
Hmm.
But you can get people on board early, and agree to the price, and you can transact pretty quickly if you set it up like that.
Yeah, that makes great sense. What so you fast forward 4 months now. What did it look like when you launched this product? Did that go well, or were there issues along the way? A lot of server crashes typically happen. Anything like that? Any bumps
For
that you?
sure, yeah. I mean, building software is messy, and the stuff crashes all the time and goes down all the time early on. It's why people pay less to access software as the early customers. There are some benefits. They get to guide where the product goes. They get a say in order and what things they would most be, what's most important to them. But um, they on the balance, I think. Yeah, I mean, there's problems, but nothing ever too serious happened. We would have, I think we were down for 2 days once, but that was in 2013 or something. It probably took 5 years to wring all the kinks out of the software, and now we have processes in place as we release things that um, we never release things now. We do release things and they break, but that's in a test environment, and so we catch it before we release it to everyone else.
Mhm.
So so we've kind of by our size, you've kind of solved those problems with automated testing and processes.
Mhm. And so you obviously started you had a good book of business launching this. What was it like when you first started to realize, you know what, there really is something here? Was that very early on that realization came about, or is that not until years into it that, you know what, this is really going to work?
Yeah, I think in January of 2014, I did my first deal over 300K, and I it was, I needed that 300K too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, it was January of 2014, and that was a 3-year paid upfront deal. So someone bought 3 years of the software by at once, and I knew at that point that there was a lot more business out there. There was nothing especially unique about that company. There were a lot of other companies like it. This was worth it enough to them that they were willing to plop down 300K for a product that a 4-person startup at that point had built. And so, I guess we were about 2 years into our life at that point. Um, and that's when I knew we were going to make it.
Yeah, excellent. So right now we're in this sort of black swan event, and there's always going to be different problems that are going to pop up in the market. What are you guys doing today to hedge yourself, your company, as much as you can against some of the unknowns that are being presented right now? Do you have any tips or advice that you guys are starting to look at, or how you're looking at your business moving forward through turbulent times?
Yeah, I think there's a few things you can do when times are turbulent. If it's a sudden event, then such as like COVID, but any sudden event really, you can, where a whole bunch of people are going to quit at once. You can try to get them to not quit by making them an offer like, oh, okay, well, when they call to quit, you can say, well, what if we give you 2 or 3 months at 50% off, and then it'll adjust back up, but that'll get us through this time. And because they don't want to, go through the brain damage of turning their thing off and then setting it all back up again, that may make it worth it to them to not actually cut it, and so you keep money coming in. You can go through all your costs with a fine tooth comb, obviously. You can try to, if you're month to month on your lease right now, you can pull out of your lease. That they're not going to release the thing to anyone else right now. If anything, in a turbulent time, no one's going to be able to release anything after that, right? For a little while at least. So you can shut your lease off, and maybe even negotiate to leave your stuff in place. Maybe you have to toss it into storage or something. Mm-hmm. You can go to your vendors and providers, your upstream vendors and providers, and ask to quit and see what they offer you. I mean, just like we would offer someone 50% off for 3 months, maybe your vendors and providers would do the same thing. So anything that is quittable, to call and say you want to quit. And if you truly don't need the thing right now, you should actually just quit, right? Mm-hmm. As long as there's not too much friction and turning it off and turning it back on again. But yeah, I mean, slicing any unnecessary things, trips that were going to happen or conferences that were going to happen, that's kind of obvious to make sure to get rid of those costs. But also, and if there's a lot of things that would have made sense in good times, maybe don't make sense now, so you can look to cut those. Like if you were going to do something to acquire customers and it was going to cost this much, well, maybe because now you think you're going to acquire way fewer customers, you just don't do that thing. You can, if you have to really start making cuts to, headcount or to employees, you can, I guess obviously you pick the things that aren't necessary, or the the lowest performing employees first. But another thing you could do to save money on headcount, which is a big, the main expense for a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can tell people, hey, we're going to cut salaries by 20%, but Fridays are now off. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a relatively fair trade for people. And I think most people will get that's not a bad deal for anybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there's just, in general, the cost of acquiring new business will rise. And so a lot of things become not worth doing. And so it's important to make sure you keep the business you have and do what you can for those customers. Perhaps you can look to shift services and shift your resources into doing something that you normally wouldn't have done. Maybe it's got a weaker margin, but it'll keep the lights on. And for some people, I mean, we've seen this. There are new uses of your company or product. For usually we service field salespeople, but right now there's doctors that are making home visits, and they actually have the same problem as a field salesperson. A lot of the same problems we solve. A hospital group or a healthcare group that's sending doctors or nurses around to people's homes to give them care, they need us just the same way as a salesperson would normally use us to go around and do what they do in the field. We've seen restaurants that are starting up delivery services use our product to figure out where the people are that are buying their food, and then run kind of route the deliveries and the cars there. So looking for different types of use cases or things that you can do with your firm to make money in these times is a great idea too, a thought exercise that everybody should go through.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess we should talk about debt too. I mean, obviously that's the news. When you're in tough times, and if it's going to be a short downturn for whatever reason, debt is a great way to get through. And I could discuss what the gotchas are around debt deals. I've worked in debt a lot, so I can speak to that if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess maybe make a quick framework around what exactly you're saying. Debt. I'm assuming that it's that you would get a loan from either a bank or some type of institution, maybe even a private investor, and like you said, some of the gotchas or some of the things to look out for in that process.
Yeah. So debt is anyone that can loan you money. Could be a supplier, could be a customer, could be, more commonly it's a bank. But banks aren't really in the business of loaning that much money usually. They're a lot of lending happens on private markets. I mean, obviously big companies have bonds, but private lenders have stepped into a lot of spaces in the last 10 years to make loans. Banks have lines of credit. That's not a huge loan really, and banks make direct loans. Although a lot of times those are PG. Personally guaranteed loans is what the banks often do, where they want to give you a loan against something that you're guaranteeing. Like they'll say, okay, well, we'll give you this loan for $1 million, but you as the business owner have to personally guarantee that this is going to get paid back. So if the company isn't able to pay it back, then you are personally on the line, and that means your car, your house, stuff like that. So banks aren't necessarily, or anyone asking for a PG is not the first group I would prefer to go to. Private investors tend to be better. I mean, in a downturn environment. So I've got a lot of private debt with investors, and they're thrilled right now because they make 15% on those loans, and if they otherwise didn't have those loans, they probably would have had it exposed to the market and lost 35%. So there's a 50% swing there. They've got 50% more money than they would have if they weren't making debt investments. So debt's attractive to people right now if they believe that you'll be able to pay them back, obviously. So there's nothing about your business that makes them fundamentally think, this thing could actually go bankrupt and not be able to pay its debts. So as long as they believe the company will be around for the next 3 years, they should be willing to make a 3-year debt loan to you. And if there's market fears, then it's probably a great time to do that. And a fair rate for debt can be anywhere from a bank would give you 5% all the way up to 22% for like a specialty lender. And then there's a bunch of usury lenders. There's a bunch of lending platforms out there that charge like 30 to 40%, which is pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
The problem is that the reason they do that, you can't do that with consumers. Obviously, there's protections in place for consumers, but those protections don't exist for companies. So they can charge what they want. It's a contract. You got to pay it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they're just not allowed to go over a certain amount for consumers. I'm not sure what that amount is, but I think it's right around what credit cards are at.
Okay. And do you have any advice on finding what lenders, investors would be best for you?
Yeah, I mean, ask around to the people in the space who like for us. I mean, in the SaaS software space, there's 20 lenders that go after specifically SaaS software business to sell loans to. But in a lot of spaces, there's someone that kind of specializes in that space, and that's kind of their area. So I'd ask around to bankers and investment bankers and lawyers and people that kind of other business executives that are kind of in the space will know who these guys are. I mean, you can Google it too. I mean, if I Googled SaaS lenders, I'd be able to find. If I didn't know who they were, I'd be able to find a lot of them. Maybe probably not all of them, but enough. Mm-hmm. One tricky thing with Googling them is a lot of these guys are relatively small, and often a few of them will take the lion's share of the SEO juice. And so, a two-person, mom and pop lending shop could be lending $60 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
mm-hmm.
and they haven't invested anything in SEO or their web presence. They can be a little hard to find, harder to find than you guess. But making loans has been a big business as of late, and so there's a lot of lenders, and a lot of them are looking great right now because their returns have been returning and everything else melted. So there are gotchas, things to watch out for when you're taking a loan that I would keep in mind. You want to make sure you're not getting a loan there's a lot of legalese terms in a loan contract, but they actually really matter. This isn't like signing off on your iTunes account. You want to really go over these terms and probably with the help of a lawyer or someone who knows what they're doing. But some terms to really watch out for. You want to make sure the lender can't just call the loan back, meaning if you borrow $1 million, they can't just let in a month and a half, hey, we want that $1 million back. You're like, hey, mm-hmm. I spent it. Like I thought this was a 3-year loan, but they could have a term in there that they get to call it back whenever they want, or else bad things happen. Mm-hmm. In general, the whole covenants section is you gotta look out for. They can have liquidity covenants. That's one banks love. Banks love. So they're making you $1 million loan, but by the way, you have to have $1 million or $500,000 in your checking account with that bank at all times. So, and I know that sounds crazy. You're like, wait, if you're loaning me $1 million, but I can't spend $1 million, what's the point? And the mm-hmm. point is there is no point.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's not illegal for them to make that offer to you, but there's no reason for you to take it. So that's one to watch out for, especially with banks. There are covenants around their ability to speed up paying the loan back, or changing the percentage that you're paying back if certain conditions occur, like maybe your revenue should your revenue slow or contract for 3 months in a row, then you've got to start paying us back at this rate, or at this speed because of that. And you want to make sure you negotiate terms like this out. And by the way, any term with a loan is negotiable. They'll tell you, oh, we can't negotiate that, but everything, they're giving you money for a return. Like everything from the amount of money to the return to every single covenant is is negotiable. EBITDA covenants they'll put in place. In SaaS, like MRR multiple covenants, like if you're MRR, which is another kind of a monthly recurring revenue, it's just a way of, if everyone is paying you monthly, that's your monthly recurring revenue. How much money you make this month if every single customer pays you monthly. Mm-hmm. And they could not only have a revenue covenant, but they could also have an MRR covenant. And that can change industry by industry, obviously. Early payback penalties, that's a really common one. They'll get you on that. They'll say, well, yeah, if you pay this back early, you also have to pay back all the interest that you would have paid for the entire life of the loan. So that means if you get a loan at 20% from someone, a year and a half goes by, and you want to refi that loan because you find someone else who will give you a 15% loan. If you actually make the change and swap swap that lender out, then you have to pay them the full term of the loan for 4 years at 20% in order, the penalty is as a penalty to do that. Mm-hmm. And they'll just slide that in as like a 2-sentence, condition in the contract. But that's one that's definitely, you can negotiate away. They can block you getting other loans, and with any other, they can set any condition on that. They can block you from getting loans that are above them, meaning they get paid back before them, or they'll block you from being able to make a payment on a loan until their loan is completely satisfied. They could block you from getting a loan over a certain rate. I mean, they can take any attribute of a loan and write it in that it's blocked, and that's pretty common.
Interesting. Yeah.
And it is reason. I mean, to some degree, like if a bank is making you a loan, it's reasonable that they don't want you to be able to bring in like a usury lender at 40% that gets paid back at the same rate as they do, because that puts at risk your ability to pay them back, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas I don't think it's reasonable for you to put in place a lender beneath them in the stack, meaning that they get paid back before this new lender, should you get into trouble, or I think you should always be able to bring in a loan that's of a lower percent than they're giving you. I think that's fair too. But mm-hmm. These are all like cases that you can negotiate. I'm trying to think if I can think of anything else. How do lenders screw you? 101.
I love it. That's a perfect name.
So let me think here. I've seen lenders say you can only use our loan to pay certain things back, and those certain things, like one I can think of is a lender that only lets you pay for marketing type expenses like Google or Facebook ads or Apple ads. And so that's a stream of income, but you have to borrow all the money up front and start paying interest on all the money up front. So you have to borrow. If you're spending, it's a 6-month loan, and so it's a very short-term loan. And it's for $120,000 because you're paying $20,000 to marketing expenses of advertising expenses of that nature a month. So you get the whole $120,000, but you're only allowed to use that $120,000 on marketing expenses. You know that you can only actually use it on this stream, on this $20,000 stream. So you borrowed $120,000 for 6 months. You're paying 20% interest on it, but all you can do is pay off marketing expenses. Well, all that's actually doing is it's a $20,000 loan, because the marketing pays itself back at the end of that month. And, you put $1 in the funnel. Hopefully $1.20 comes out the bottom. Hopefully $2, but depends on the efficiency of the marketing. But you end up, you're basically borrowing $20,000 but paying for $120,000. So that's a really bad mm-hmm. deal. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you think you're getting money, but you're like, wait, when I do the math, I'm actually not getting anything, and they're just getting a really killer deal. And a lot of times the lenders that advertise the most are the worst lenders, because they're able to advertise a lot, because when they actually get a customer, it's worth a ton to them. Whereas some mom and pop shop making loans for 15%, and they're loaning out $60 million to a certain industry that they think is very highly likely to be able to pay them back and give them a 15% return. They might hardly be advertising at all. Mm-hmm. So you got to be who you get a loan from is very important.
And do you see the 15% return sort of as being the industry standard that a lot of the lenders are looking for, or is that sort of all over the board as well?
That's all over the board. It just depends. It depends on the industry. I think some industries have much more expensive loans than other industries would. So, in the SaaS industry, it depends on your size. So it could be 22% if you're making 500 grand a year. It should be, 17, 18% if you're making $3 million a year. So it just kind of depends, I would say, on what industry you're in. I wouldn't know if you were a retail store, and well, it might get cheaper. We have no assets to lend against, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing to collateralize with software, because you can't just say, well, this software is worth something. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
you mean all those ones and zeros? How do I sell that? I don't understand. Whereas if you're a retail store, maybe you can collateralize your inventory, and you can get a loan against that. Or if you're a trucking company, you can use your trucks as collateral. Companies like that can go to banks and get money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're a SaaS company, you cannot.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, excellent. Steven, this has been fantastic. Where, if people wanted to find out a little bit more about you or any of your products or anything, where would you suggest that they go?
Well, best place to find me is on LinkedIn, probably. So Steven Benson, and then the company's called Badger Maps. If you're interested in the company and learning more there, because you're in field sales, or badgermapping.com. My podcast is a podcast for field salespeople specifically, not surprisingly, and it's called Outside Sales Talk. So you can find that on all the platforms. But yeah, if you're buying Badger, mention this podcast, and we'll give you 2 months free just for enduring listening to me.
It was good. It was good. No, I certainly appreciate that, Steven. No, this has been good, and I'm sure that we will keep in touch. I actually, again, a lot of the listeners are in real estate. I have a background in real estate, so I'm going to check it out for for us being able to track all of these things. So,
Cool.
so this is fun. I appreciate it. Thanks, Steven.
Absolutely. Well, hey, it's been great to chat, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Take